Season 2 Chapter 1. Previously on A New Legacy. Hope, please come back. My beast roared as I felt myself being dragged into my mindscape. I opened my eyes to the voice. It was Kurama in his human form. I see you've unlocked it, Kit. I stared confusedly as he pointed down to the water beneath me. I looked down and saw my eyes purple with rings around it. I whispered in wonder, the Rinnegan. Love breeds sacrifice, which in turn breeds hatred. Then you can know pain. That was something I heard Nagato Pain said before I defeated him. He told me love breeds sacrifice and I never agreed more, but I don't hate hope. I could never hate hope. If I did, I would become a hypocrite since I done the exact same thing to save the elemental nations. It's been about a month since Hope jumped into Malivore and no one except me was able to remember. Thought I stopped the monsters and called me a hero. I would scoff inwardly and ignore their praises. I told Alaric it wasn't me, though he couldn't remember. Hope he did realize I was telling the truth by using the blessing he got from the elder dragons. It was called the truth-seeing eye. It had no real special ability other than being able to detect lies, and he knew I was telling the truth when I told him someone else jumped in Malivore to stop it from rising. Flashback to 1 month ago. When I opened my eyes and stared at the reflection, I realized I unlocked a dojutsu that only a few had. I looked to my father figure in awe, yet my chest clenched painfully since he wasn't really here, merely a chakra imprint. How? I asked, touching my eyes in wonder. You experienced a traumatic event, one that shook you to your core and caused immense stress on your chakra system. He paused as he knelt down before me. It unlocked these eyes. There was a hint of sadness I could pick up in his voice, and all at once the crushing feeling returned. Felt like there was a piece of concrete weighing on my heart. Hope, I said barely above a whisper. A tear ran down my cheek. I didn't bother to wipe it away. These eyes were unlocked because I lost the love of my life, the woman I saw my future with, the woman who sacrificed her life to save everyone else's. It was too high of a price to pay for these eyes. I don't want them. I shook my head. I don't want them. If I had to lose her, Dad. Take it back. My voice got louder. I felt myself being pulled into a warm chest, an embrace I haven't felt in months. I sobbed shamelessly into his chest as held him. I can't take it back, but I can teach you how to use it, he said sadly. My tears stopped eventually. I knew he was right, but I couldn't help but hate these eyes. It was stupid, I knew that, but the heart, it a fickle organ. I hated what it represented, and somehow Kurama knew that was going through my mind. Don't view your gift as a curse, just like you didn't view me as a curse. Cherish it and think of it as a gift from the woman you love, he said wisely. I nodded my head and cleaned my face from my tears and recognized he didn't put it in past tense or say that it was a final gift. It's never over, Naruto. As long as you believe there's a way, there will be. I chuckled through my tears. Since when did he become such an optimist? Hey, since when are you such an optimist? He smacked my head as he got up and huffed. That's your fault, Kit. Now come on, we have training to do, he said, and I nodded. For the next few hours in my mindscape he taught me how to use the Rinnegan, and when it was over he gave me one last hug before his chakra faded. Never give up, Naruto, he said, holding out his fist. I gave him my own foxy grin and bumped my fist to his. I never will believe it. Flashback over. I entered Alaric's office. We were still investigating the triad, trying to find out whether there were any other warehouses in other locations. Rick, I said as I sat down into the comfy leather chair opposite the desk. Naruto, you good? He asked. I saw the concern in his eyes, and I'm not going to lie, I feel the emptiness when I don't wake up to see Hope sleeping next to me on a weekend, or join me for Friday night movies. Then adding on to the fact that no one in this goddamn school knows who she is angers me even more. My jaw clenched before I sighed heavily, rubbing the bridge of my nose tiredly. I'm fine, I answered tiredly. Anything new on our friends the triad? I watched his face change in an instant to disgust. He disliked them as much as I did. They came into the school with guns, threatening the lives of children regardless of them being supernatural or not. It was a disgusting thing to do. No, nothing new other than the warehouse in Georgia. He paused and looked at me. Will you be going? I nodded. Yeah, I will. It's summer vacation soon, and I know you want to track leads about the curse on the twins, I said, standing up to pour myself a drink. Have you heard from the Michelsons? I asked him with my back turned. I didn't need to see his face to know he grimaced at the name. even though no one remembered Hope. They sure did remember the Mikhailson name. I didn't know. I know you're telling the truth about this Hope girl, but even so, they won't be able to remember her if she jumped into Malivore. I finished my drink and put roughly down on the table. So much for always and forever, I muttered underneath my breath. Rick, you don't need to keep reminding me that no one remembers her. Frustration seeping into my voice, I saw him lift his hands in defense. I'm sorry, I cut him off with a wave of my hand. No, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be getting angry at you. I breathed out a breath and closed my eyes, trying to calm down. It's hard being the only one that can remember, and sometimes I don't know whether it's a blessing or a curse, I said before staring at the man before. He stood to his feet and clapped my shoulder affectionately. I don't think it's a curse, Naruto. I smiled a polite smile. Not a real one. I haven't smiled a real smile since she left. I nodded to the man. I'll go pack for my trip, I said, walking away from his office. I walked through the hallways with my hands in my pockets, deep in thought. I looked up and realized I was in front of her door. I put my hand against the door and remembered when I dropped her off after our first date. Flashback. You can't say that you can't promise me always and forever, she said as tears pooled in her eyes. You're right, I can't. I agreed and watched a tear slip from the girl's eyes. She turned her face, but I moved it back to me. That's your family's motto, but I can promise you an eternity of tomorrows, I said before I leaned in and kissed her lips softly. I pulled away and kept my forehead to hers. So will you be my girlfriend, Hope? I asked softly. She laughed. Yes, I will. Flashback over. I came out of my thoughts and whispered, I miss you, princess. I walked away from the room and went to my own. When I came back from that warehouse, I asked Alaric to make sure no one uses Hope's room and that it stays as. Didn't ask many questions because he could see the look in my when I requested it. I laid down on my bed and looked to the dresser. Everything in my room was moved around by Hope. She had her underwear in my drawers. Framed pictures that had her picture in them were all facing down. I didn't need another reminder that she wasn't here. All I did nowadays were train, eat, shower and track down leads, trying to find a way to access this fucking pit, but my efforts has been useless so far. There's no use lamenting over it either. At least I know she's not dead. How I knew that was because when Kurama taught me how to use these eyes, the first thing I did was to summon the King of Hell to see whether her soul was there, but no dice. I was upset but relieved at the same time because that meant she was still alive somewhere, floating in a void of nothingness. I started packing my clothes for the trip, making sure I had all my sealing scrolls stocked with weapons and my new katana too. I picked up my hoodie. It still smelled like Hope. I put it to my nose and inhaled deeply, remembering how she denied returning the hoodie. Flashback. I sat on the bed waiting for Hope to get ready for our movie night. We usually would stay in and watch a movie, but she wanted to go into town. Hope, you finished yet? Give me a second. I said cheekily. I heard her huff and open the bathroom door. Idiot. I shrugged and went to grab my hoodie to put it on before it was roughly pulled out of my grip. What did I say? I looked confused. This is. She pointed to the garment in her hands, now the property of Hope Andrea Mikhailson. And how do you figure that, Miss Mikhailson? I raised my eyebrow in question. She shrugged and smirked. Girlfriend rights and all that, she waved off nonchalantly. You lucky I like you, Mikhailson. I mocked anger. She patted my cheek condescendingly. Many do. That smirk never leaving her face as she exited the room. I stood in shock, realizing she just compared me to the golem. Hey, I'm offended. I heard her amused laughter down the hallway as I locked my door and ran after her. Flashback over. I finished my packing and gathered the duffel bag, walking out the door and locked it. I walked silently through the hallways. I was stuck in my mind thinking about whether I would get new leads in Georgia, since Landon was no help other than him being seen as a hero too, since people thought he helped shut down the pit. God, I wish I left him at that warehouse sometimes. I heard a familiar voice that shook me from my inner monologue about planning the Hobbit's murder. Leaving without saying goodbye, are we? Questioned Lizzie. I chuckled at the girl and turned around, giving the girl a small smile. I wouldn't dream of it, I said sarcastically, rolling my eyes, and she narrowed her eyes at the sarcasm, playfully bumping my shoulder. Just because the girls here see you as a hero doesn't mean you get to be an ass. I patted her head as she scolded me. Not a hero, Elizabeth. I've told you this before, but I was going to say goodbye, I said, looking to Josie, who was walking our way as well. How long will you be gone then? Asked Josie. I pulled them into a quick hug. Not sure, hopefully I'll be back before the new school year starts. I let them go and fixed my duffel bag over my shoulder. I didn't tell them about Hope, but I'm pretty sure they noticed my mood change over the last month. I hadn't spent much time with them either, but I blamed it on investigating the triad. Be careful and safe, okay, and make sure to check in once in a while, said the brunette sternly. Yes, mother, I said before walking out the door to my car. It was a sleek black muscle car called a Mustang. I saw the same version in Fast and the Furious and loved it the moment I laid eyes on it. I got a talking to about managing my money efficiently from Hope, but it was worth it though. I made myself comfortable in the leather seats and threw my duffel bag in the back up the engine. Smiling a bit at the sound of it, I checked the visor, a picture of Hope, and I fell out. It was after the movies and I insisted that we needed to document the moment, so we did. I put it back in the visor with a sigh and drove out of the gates. The school faded in the rear view mirror the further I drove. Georgia, here I come. Season 2, Chapter 2. Hope Pav. I've never given too much thought about how I would feel if I died, but now those are about the only thoughts I have floating around my head, while I'm drifting in a pool of nothingness. Life has never been kind to me, but I was blessed with a family that loved me against all odds, a father that was my knight and protected me from all the bad things like he said he was years ago when he said that I would have nothing that scares me but even the strongest which has fears. Dad. Flashback to a 7-year-old Hope. My dad knelt down before me after we took a walk through the woods. You, my love, are the daughter of Klaus Mikaelson. You're going to be the greatest which the world has ever seen. And nothing will scare you. Flashback over. I miss Naruto. Thinking about him brought an unbearable pain to my chest. He didn't cry much, in fact he only cried twice. The first time I saw him cry was when he killed the siren that wore my face. The second would be when I betrayed him by allowing him to never fulfill his promise of an eternity of screams calling out my name in such sorrow. Despair and sadness still echoes in my mind. So yes, I never give much thought to how I would die. Would it hurt? Would there be a long line of people waiting in line to get revenge on the daughter Niklaus Mikaelson, the original hybrid? Or would it be swift, quick and painless? Yeah, it's none of those. It's like drowning in a pit of absolute nothingness. Instead of water filling up my lungs, I have darkness. Instead of sinking into the depths of the deepest ocean, I have a void of emptiness. That seems similar to how hollow my heart is becoming. And when you try to call for help, no one hears you. No one answers you because they've simply forgotten that you ever existed. And to be honest, I think I prefer having a long line of enemies before me as they wait their turn to kill their enemies' only heir, as opposed to slowly descending into madness. Am I drowning? I questioned to the empty void. Eyes closed, and I thought back to Naruto's face. His smile, the way his orange-reddish eyes would glint in mischief, not to mention that perverted smile he'd have on his face whenever he stared at my breasts. Gosh, I miss him. I thought, I don't know how long I've been in here, but it sure feels like I'm drowning, and his face is the only face that brings me some reprieve from drowning. I've been walking for a very long time. I wonder where Landon's brother is. I know I brought him here with me, because I'm sure he would have just created more trouble outside. Come to think of it, why haven't I run into any monsters? I muttered to myself as I looked around. I heard footsteps echo with a voice I really didn't need to hear accompany it. They're all locked away, he said with that irritating smile on his face. My eyes narrowed. What do you want? I asked, taking a step back from him. Is that any way to speak to the guy you dragged into nothingness? My eyes narrowed further and I crossed my arms over my chest and tilted my head at the question. Did I do that? I questioned, feigning forgetfulness. You did. His facial expression didn't change much now. Either this guy is incapable of it, or maybe he wants to get to me, and help the process of me descending slowly into madness. Seems like something I would do, I said, and turned and walked away from him. Before I could take a step, I heard him say something I wished at this moment I wasn't able to. Malivore is not defeated, Hope Mikaelson. My fists clenched tightly. No, he's messing with me. He can't be right. I know I jumped in here to save my friends, the love of my life and the school, and left them behind, letting them all forget about me. I couldn't possibly have let Naruto forgotten me and now achieved my goal. It wasn't possible. I shut my eyes, willing my tears not to fall, and took a calming breath. You're lying, I said softly without turning around to face him. Am I? Now why would I do that? His tone was light and airy, like he didn't have a care in the world. Why would you tell me this in the first place? Since you worked so hard to make him rise. I have my reasons. I sighed and unclenched my fists, turning on my heel facing the pale curly-haired bastard. Well, you've got my attention, talk. Well, I'd like us to strike a deal, he said, smiling with a evil glint in his eye. God, it's like dealing with an even more annoying Landon, except this one has a "I'm better than you" kind of air around him. Naruto Pav. It's been about 2 months since Hope jumped into Malivore, and I've been driving all over the country to find these triad bases, from the information I got from the guys in Georgia who so generously provided them. I found another warehouse in Houston, a place called Pasadena. I sincerely hoped it wasn't a hick town. The drive was a couple of hours. I created a shadow clone while I caught up on some rest. The information these people had given me so far was nothing important. Kept repeating they didn't know who gave the orders, though it was someone from their head office, and on Earth had this organization gone undetected so long? I have no idea. I understand their mission in removing dangerous creatures who would threaten the humans as a whole race, like dinosaurs, dragons, or fucking hydras, but now they want to wipe out all forms of supernatural life in the name of God. I outright laughed in that guy's face as he gave me a lecture of an ideal world where humans are the only apex predators and the supernatural are abominations, mistakes of nature that needed to be eradicated. They sure had a warped view of the world if they thought human beings were the apex predator. I'm pretty sure some animals in the jungle would have a major problem with that, but I digress. So yeah, no new information other than them viewing supernaturals as abominations. I called Rick to update him about my findings. The man nearly got a heart attack when he realized it wasn't just the school who would have been in trouble, but every supernatural creature in the world. I saw the signs that I was now entering Pasadena. I drove to where the warehouse was. I pulled up on a gravel road, and decided to go on foot from here. I suited up wearing a black tight turtleneck, black pants, and a pair of boots. I half covered my face with a mask and changed my hair color to black so I wouldn't be recognizable to these people if caught on camera. I ran through the branches of the trees, applying chakra to my feet to keep me from falling. I had 2 pouches attached to my thigh, one with kunai, the other with shuriken, courtesy of the foxes. I'm still not convinced Ren doesn't steal these tools from the Forest of Death. I crouched as watched the warehouse. It seemed like an average warehouse from outside, abandoned, but the fence around the warehouse looked. Amount of guards they had was suspicious. Yeah, it sure looks like there's nothing important in there, I scoffed. It was about 4 in the afternoon. I decided to go in at the cover of night to infiltrate the warehouse. A couple of hours passed as I waited. The guard shift changed, probably the night shift taking over. I made a couple of clones with orders to incapacitate them, quickly and silently. I watched as 6 guards dropped to the ground quickly and their guns destroyed. All right, your turn, Uzumaki. Seriously, should stop referring to myself in the third person, I thought. I jumped over the fence quickly and muttered under my breath, "My Seigaku no Jutsu." As I blended with my surroundings, I walked down the passageways. It looked empty on the top floor, keeping the appearance of an abandoned warehouse. I was about to exit when I saw a guy coming from a trapdoor downstairs. As he exited, I got behind him, put my hand over his mouth to cover his screams, and held in a necklock that rendered him unconscious. I picked his body up and avoided the cameras as I dragged him in a dark room and took his security tag. I took a good look at his face and hanged into him. Instead of the black hair, I changed my hair color too. I now had a brown hair, green cargo pants, boots with vest. I took his handgun from his and put it in the waistband of my cargo pants. I looked at the security badge, Joe Looney. It read, "You've got to be kidding me, Joe Looney." Ha, funny, I thought. Well, I guess I'm Joe Looney now. I continued my mission and went down the trapdoor, where I saw the man exit. As I walked down, I saw a room full of monitors showing different images, some of the school, Mystic Falls, and other places I wasn't too familiar with. I squinted my eyes when I saw images of Alaric and information on his daughters Gisette and Elizabeth Saltzman. I clenched my fist in anger but continued to survey the room. There was a couple of chairs, but they were empty. It was about 9 p.m., so the rest probably went home. I looked to my left. There was a glass door office that had a dark-skinned woman in with curly black hair sitting in a chair typing away on her. Hadn't noticed me yet, and I made my way to the office, knocking on the door. "Come in," was heard from the other side of the office. "Again, Joe, I already gave you your orders," she said, irritated, probably because he just left from the office. I scratched my head impishly, trying to keep the facade of Joe. I really didn't know how this guy acted, but from the look on the woman's face it seemed like a usual occurrence. "I said your orders are to take out Alaric Saltzman and his daughters." I kept my calm. My face betrayed no obvious expression other than a firm line my lips was set into. As she spoke, I looked to the desk and saw the surname. Same surname as Milton. My mind was working overtime. If she was in charge of this whole operation, she would kill her son too in the name of Triad or whatever. I must have been too quiet while she was speaking. As she stopped typing and looked up to me, I gave her a eye smile. "Is there a problem, Joe?" she asked impatiently. "I have many things to do and I don't have time to babysit you," she snapped. Well, I've got only one problem," I said, using my finger for emphasis. "Well, spit it out." I let my hinge drop and my real appearance come out. "Well, the problem is I really don't want to kill my bro and two little sisters," I said. Before she could make a move, I grabbed both hands and took out some ninja wire and wrapped it around her body, so every time she moved the ninja wire would cut into her skin. "I wouldn't move if I were you. This wire is carbon fiber. Do you know what happens when it's wrapped so tightly around, I don't know, a human body?" I paused as I spun her chair around to face me. My eyes flashed my altered version of the Rinnegan. Instead of it being purple, it was a magenta color, now the rings still black, as I stared her dark brown eyes. "I don't know," she said, trying to remain still. A cruel smirk curled up on my lips. Torturing wasn't something I enjoyed, but there were times when being or playing the bad guy to get answers to save lives was absolutely necessary. I learned that from Itachi Uchiha after I found the real reason he massacred his clan, not for power but for the lives of the villagers. "Well, the wire will get irritated," I said, moving away, pulling up my own chair and sat before her. "Then slowly dig into your clothing." I placed my cheek against my closed fist and crossed my legs, my eyes never leaving the woman. "Then once it gets through the fabric of your clothing, it goes through the supple flesh of your body." She tried to keep a straight face, but I could see the fear in her eyes. Even more so, I could smell it rolling off her in droves. I smiled, showing my now sharp canines. "Then, Mrs. Greasley, you'll bleed out, dying a slow, agonizing death, but for me you'll be getting what's coming to you since you feel it necessary to assassinate children, and all supernaturals." I paused, decided to take a leap of faith. She shared many features with MG, but the scent was different, but that might be because he's a vampire and essentially dead. "And that includes your son, Milton Greasley," I said, finishing my explanation. I watched the range of emotions that flickered across her face. Regret, fear, disgust and anger being the biggest, but she felt disgust when I mentioned Milton. Clearly she didn't approve of his new circumstances. "Who are you?" she asked, narrowing her eyes at me, trying to keep a tough demeanor. "Who I am is of no consequence to you, and you're not the one asking the questions. Here I am," I said with a bored expression. "So how about we start, and if you give me the answers I want, I won't go after your husband." I paused. "Or your still living non-vampire daughter," I threatened. Of course I wouldn't, but she didn't need to know that. Thank God Alaric deemed it necessary for me to know every student's name and family, otherwise I wouldn't be able to even threaten this woman with that, because she definitely looks like the type that wouldn't say anything unless her loved ones were at risk, and it was clear she no longer saw MG as a son. "You're bluffing," she said through gritted teeth, and hissed from the pain she felt when she moved and the ninja wire dig in her clothing. "I might be." I grinned a foxy grin and shrugged at her rebuttal. "But would you like to take that chance?" My right brow raised at the stubborn woman. I watched her face set into resignation. "What?" she stammered over her words and clenched her fist. "What would you like to know?" I leaned forward and put my elbows on my knees with my fingers interlocked. My face changed from a grin to a serious look in seconds. Everything. Season 2, Chapter 3. Previously on A New Legacy. Secrets revealed. "But would you like to take that chance?" My right brow raised at the stubborn woman. I watched her face set into resignation. "What?" she stammered over her words and clenched her fist. "What would you like to know?" I leaned forward and put my elbows on my knees with my fingers interlocked. My face changed from a grin to a serious look in seconds. Everything. Hope Pav. I stared at Ryan, narrowing my eyes. I didn't trust him. I couldn't trust him because if he had his way, Malivore would rise and people's lives would be at risk. I sighed inwardly, though the only choice I had was to hear him out. Deal? I questioned. What would this deal entail? I questioned slowly. I watched his facial expression carefully. He had one hell of a poker face. I couldn't decipher his intentions. I listened closely to his heartbeat to find anything irregular as I waited for him to speak. Well, Hope. He paused, putting his hands behind his back, straightening up his back as he took a step closer. I watched him carefully, my mouth drawn in a straight line with the eyebrow raised, gesturing for him to continue. I'll tell you how to get out of here. He stopped again. Now it was getting quite irritating with the dramatic build-up. If he didn't have similar features to Landon, I would have thought he shared genetics with Lizzie. I'm assuming there's a condition somewhere in there, considering the way you're pausing for dramatic effect. I said, rolling eyes at the pale man. I see what Landon saw in you. He said, a chuckle. I didn't give him a response, though I'm sure he wasn't waiting for one either, as he continued. Yes, there is a condition, Hope, and that is that you have to take me with you once I tell you how to leave. And what would stop me from getting out of here by myself, and leaving you behind? Well, let's just say you won't like what I have in mind if you choose to betray me. Besides, I thought Michaelsons kept their word. I sighed inwardly. Yes, our word was our bond, though my father found loopholes to that particular rule all the time. And let's suppose I agree to your deal and leave Malivore. Why would you tell me all this? I don't think it's simply because you can't spend forever in here. After all, Malivore is your father. No. Seemed like I struck a nerve. I saw his face twitch in dislike when I mentioned his poker face isn't that great. Well, Hope. Let's say I had my reasons for letting my father rise, and reasons I will not be disclosing with you, but I will say that my father isn't really winning any awards for his caring nature. He said simply, his face returning to his previous mask. I really wish I had Naruto's sensor right about now. But wait, how did you know that Malivore wasn't destroyed when I jumped in? It's been very quiet since I got here too. I asked, confused, because I knew Malivore was created by a vampire, witch and werewolf, so me being all three would definitely destroyed unless. My thoughts trailed off when I looked to gasped Ryan. He smirked when he seemed I had figured out the reason Malivore wasn't defeated. Seems you just answered your own question, Hope. Mind sharing with the class? I rubbed the bridge of my nose. How could I have overlooked that crucial detail? Just because I had vampire blood running through my veins did not mean I was a vampire. I'm not a full tribrid yet. I finished sullenly. Ryan gave me a slow clap. But what if I kill myself and go through the transition now? I questioned loudly, not to anyone in particular but myself. That won't work. Remember how all the creatures that were trapped in Malivore didn't actually die? He answered my thought. Fuck. Fuck indeed. So the only way out of here is by me telling you how, and then you and I will part ways. I hadn't even realized that I voiced that last thought out loud. I turned my back to Ryan and muttered, I have to think about it. Don't take too long, Hope. Sooner you decide, the sooner you can back to the real world, he said in an obnoxiously superior tone. Not like anyone remembers me, so I'm in no rush, I said as I walked away from Ryan. It was true, I was in no rush, but I wouldn't go to them either. I would have to complete my transition in the real world and then jump right back. Way I can spare anyone from going through it again. Naruto Pav. I sat opposite MG's mother, waiting on her to start what she knew about Malivore and its origins. Malivore was created by a witch, werewolf and vampire. I cut her off with a wave on my hand. Yes, I know all about how it was created, I said in a nonchalant tone, but inwardly I felt a pang to my chest because that was exactly why Hope jumped into Malivore in the first place. I watched the anger on the woman's face when I cut her off. That made me feel a bit better. I see. Well, I'm sure that you also know that the vampire that helped create Malivore wasn't an ordinary vampire either. I raised my eyebrow. Of course I did not know that, but I didn't give the satisfaction, so I kept my expression blank as she continued. It was an original vampire that helped the creation of Malivore. I merely nodded and questioned her. I see. And who was the original vampire that helped create the monster you're now trying to raise to remove all supernatural creatures from the face of the planet? I took a shuriken out of my pouch and began playing with it between my fingers. Was it Elijah? Or Nicholas or even Rebecca? I watched her facial expression as I listed off the names of the originals. Malivore was created 500 years ago, so that cancels out Finn Mikkelsen, since Hope told me Klaus kept him daggered in a box for 900 years for being such a Debbie Downer. Not in those exact words, but hey, the guy seemed boring. I don't think it would have been Klaus either. He was trying to break his curse, and of course Elijah following him. I smiled and tilted my head. I think I've got it. It was Cole Mikkelsen, the Wild One. He was very much into learning new tricks, so I'm sure that's the reason he helped create this creature, if nothing than for his own amusement. I watched the woman nod slightly and I motioned with my hand to let her continue. Yes, my family has been with Triad since the beginning. We used Malivore as a means to remove dangerous creatures from the world that would eradicate the human race if given the. Since then the supernatural community has become too big, so it's time we clean house, she said proudly, it even trying to mask it. I know she did it trying to rile me up, but instead I just watched and listened when she spewed her shit. No new information from you either. So tell me, Mrs. Greasley, why do I need to keep you alive? I asked seriously, because I plan to burn this entire warehouse to the ground. The answers she gave me wasn't important. Yes, I did get the name of the vampire who had a hand in creating Malivore, but that was all. The way I see it, you have nothing to offer, and because you're basically committing genocide by killing off different races of supernatural beings, I would be doing the world a favor if I removed you from said world. Quote. I paused, flicking my wrist, and let the shuriken fly past her face just close enough to leave a scratch. The shuriken sunk into the wall behind her. A thin trail of blood marred her cheek. I watched her flinch at the sensation. Don't you agree? A smile that promised pain appeared on my face. I told you everything I know, please spare me, or at least my family, she begged, the tears now cooled in her eyes. I felt her emotions, she wasn't faking it either. Then tell me something new. My tone was now hard. I was tired of playing games with this woman. I'm sure if I wanted more answers, I'd have to find Cole Mikkelsen, and I didn't know where he was, so the first place I would check when I left would be New Orleans, since Hope's aunt still lives there. What do you want to know? I told you everything about how it was created and its uses and the plan Triad has, she said, moving, as she did, the wire cut deeper into her skin, her blood staining her blazer and white shirt. I know the pit outside of Mystic Falls is now closed, I said, standing from my seat and sat down on the desk, closer to the bleeding woman. So tell me, will another one be formed, and if so, where would I find this pit? And keep in mind that I will know when you're lying, Mrs. Greasley, so I suggest you be honest, and it might just save your remaining living family. I don't know. We watched the pit for years, but there was no activity, but suddenly it activated itself and started spewing monsters. I nodded. Anything else? I asked. She shook her head. I walked behind her and slid my kunai into her brainstem, giving her a quick and painless death. I whispered, I'll leave your family alive, you have my word. I watched her go limp and offered a small prayer. Dear Kami, have mercy on my soul and hers, I said quietly, and proceeded to destroy the computers with a lightning jutsu. Reikiri, I whispered and put my hand near the electrical output and fried the computers. I flipped through signs. Guka Mekyaku no Jutsu. I felt the chakra mold and build up as I blew the fire from my mouth. I watched as the fire took root and spread in the basement. I used a shunshin out of the warehouse, my clones dispelled a few minutes ago, ensuring their targets were out of range. I sat in the tree and watched the fire spread through the warehouse, the old rotten wood falling apart. The fire raged higher. I watched carefully to see whether it would spread to the forest before it got out of control. I made a call to the fire department reporting a fire at the address before getting back to my car and leaving the site. It was getting later, maybe a motel would be the best choice and start fresh in the morning. I searched for motels close to my location and found a place called the Red Maple. It was run down, looked very suspicious, but I suppose it would do for the night. I pulled up to the near empty parking lot, grabbed my duffel bag slinging it over my shoulder, and entered the front office. I looked at the man standing behind the counter. There were dark circles under his eyes. Man, this must be a 24 hours job. Hey, I'd like a room for the night, I said to the man. He narrowed his eyes, taking in my attire. I was still wearing the black clothing from earlier. Sure, that'd be $50, he said in an accent. I nodded and gave him the cash. I'll slip in an extra 50 if you make sure nothing happens to my baby out there. I pointed with my thumb to the car. His eyes widened slightly and nodded. Sure man, no problem. I gave him the money and he gave me my room key. Room 25, have a nice stay, sir. I smiled a bit and took the key, heading off to the room number he gave me. The room was nothing much, just a single bed with a door attached which led to a small bathroom with a shower, toilet and sink in. It's cramped. I sighed and threw my duffel bag onto the small bed and went to start the shower. I took my phone out of my pocket and called Alaric. It was 12 p.m. I'm not too sure whether there was a time difference, but I thought it would be better if I update him on the new information, also tell him about MG's mother. I felt sorry for the boy, but his mother clearly didn't care much for him. It alarmed me how a parent could turn their back so easily on their own flesh and blood. Rick, I said into the phone as I sat on the bed. Hey Naruto, it's pretty late, everything alright? He asked. I could hear the sleep in his voice. Yeah, sorry, didn't mean to wake you. I just finished with the warehouse in Houston. I paused and rubbed my eyes. I got some more information about the creation of Malivore, and I got lucky. The vampire who helped create it is still alive and kicking. I heard the man breath in a sharp breath. Who is it? Do we know how to find him? He asked quickly. I made my way back to the bathroom and checked the temperature of the water with my hand. We do. It's Cole Michelson. I don't know how to find him, but I do know where I can get that information from. I could practically feel how heavily he sighed as I told him. New Orleans, he said shortly. Yeah, New Orleans, but that's not all. I've got bad news. It involves one of our resident Avengers. I paused, and it might upset you, but I did what I had to do to keep the kids safe, Rick. I said quietly. I felt guilt for killing MG's mother, but in the larger scale of things it was necessary. I know you'll do what's necessary, but I worry sometimes you haven't been in the best of places since. He trailed off. Rick, please. I scoffed. I wouldn't do it out of revenge. I know better than that, but these people, Rick, they want to change the balance of the world we currently live in. You and I know that the supernatural would not have been created if it was not necessary. Witches are born naturally, wolves carry their gene through the descendants, and perhaps vampires was created, but it was done by witches, so there's a balance, Alaric, and the balance is being threatened by an organization that thinks they're the right hand of God. I finished heatedly, leaning my head against the tiled wall of the small bathroom. I heard him sigh and breath. I know that, but like I said, I worry about you, bro. That's what bros do, right? I chuckled at his reply. Yeah, you're right, sorry. So yeah, the woman who was in charge of this whole operation in Houston was a Veronica Greasley, I said softly. MG's mother. Why would she want to kill her own son? He asked angrily. I nodded along. I don't know, but I do know that she would, and she wouldn't even blink while doing. Thought of him as, and once I got the answers we needed, I did what was necessary. I see. Will you tell him the truth when you get back? I mulled the possibility in my head, but it was better for the truth than a lie, and besides, she put a hit on Alaric and his daughters for extermination. Yeah, I will. I'm going to get a shower and some sleep. Be careful, Rick. They had images of you, the girls, and every other student that attends Salvatore. Let Caroline know, all right? Yeah, thanks for the heads up. I appreciate. Get some rest, and I'll call you if I have any new news from my end. I said my goodbyes and chucked my phone on the bed and went to shower. The heat of the water felt great on my body. As the water ran over my face, I thought about my 6-hour drive ahead tomorrow and groaned. I'm sure the Michelsons will be charming. Season 2, Chapter 4. Hope Pav. Hours passed, maybe. Considering I've lost all sense of time in this goddamn place. I thought about Ryan's seemed appealing, but I couldn't trust him. What if in the process we unleash more monsters or Malivore gets released? So I didn't trust him, but on the other hand, even if I stay here, the sacrifice I made was meaningless because I'm not doing anything to stop Malivore either. Maybe I'm afraid to face reality, because if I go back to the real world and see the faces I want to see but them not recognizing me would make my meaningless sacrifice reality. Nothing's ever truly meaningless, Hope. My mind said back to me, and yeah, maybe I'm getting a tiny bit stir-crazy in here too. I heard the clicking of shoes come toward me. I didn't have to look to know it was Ryan. Have you thought about my proposition, Hope? My mind was still going through the different scenarios, how bad it would be if I agreed to his deal before I answered him. I am. I paused. I'm going thinking about it real hard. You can trust me on that. I said. I sank down to the floor. And what do you say? Will you trust little ol' me to get you out of here, or will you wallow for forever in here? I rubbed the bridge of my nose. His tone made it even harder to trust him. Tell me what you'll do when you get out. Will you continue to try and raise your father so that it can wreak havoc in the real world? I asked, taking a shot. He seemed to pause, but the smile never leaving his face. Like this situation was so damn not a morbid person. I understand humor, but there was no humor in this situation. Now maybe I will or maybe I won't, depends really. My eyes narrowed at that comment. On what? I calmed myself and stood up to my feet. Do you really want to see the world destroyed or whatever chaos Malivore will bring? I saw some emotion flicker in his eyes, but as soon as I saw it, it disappeared. He sighed before turning around. I will tell you this, Hope Mikhailson, I never wanted to raise my father willingly, he said before walking away, leaving me once again with my thoughts and to think about that last comment of his. I can't trust you, I said underneath my breath. I watched his back disappear into the darkness. Trusting Ryan is dangerous and I won't and can't trust him, but we both benefit from the deal. If what he said was true, that him raising his father was never his own choice, then maybe, just maybe, I have a chance to get out of here and finish what I started. Those are a lot of maybes. Oh, shut up, I know it is. Flashback. We were sitting on the dock, watching the sun set. I kept thinking about what he told me about leadership and trust. You're thinking too loud, Hope, he said without looking away from the view. What's wrong? I sighed and set my head on his shoulder. Our hands were intertwined. What do you do if you can't trust anyone around you? I'm not talking about my friends, but what if you're in a situation like that? I heard him breath in and out again before he spoke, while making small patterns on the back of my hand. That's easy, trust yourself. He paused. Trust in your abilities, your strength, your intelligence. So yes, when you're surrounded by someone you can't trust, the obvious choice is to trust in yourself, he finished, pecking my head. Is that what you were thinking so hard about? I guess, but you make it sound so easy. I heard him chuckle. No, it wasn't easy for me, but growing up like I did made me trust myself and Kurama. There was a moment of silence before he broke it. Besides, don't think too hard, your brain might just burst. He laughed and flicked my forehead softly. Flashback over. He made it sound so easy, but I needed to trust myself. To be honest, I'm not even sure where to find Ryan. He walks off and disappears, so I guess I'll have to wait here for him and let him know I've made my choice. It would be nice to see you one last time, even if you don't remember me. Naruto Pav. It was 9 p.m. when I left the motel and started to drive to New Orleans. I arrived at 3 p.m. the afternoon. I didn't know where to find Freya, but I guess I would have to go to the French Quarter first. Besides, I was hungry and needed to get something to eat. I parked my car at the side of the street and walked through the seemed lively. From what Hope told me, New Orleans was where most supernatural species made their homes. My phone rang. I looked at the ID. Elizabeth. She was probably going to give me a earful, since I haven't contacted them in weeks, but spoke mostly to Alaric. Hey Eli, I said into the phone as I passed some restaurants. I blinked and saw a restaurant looked like a burger place. The little bell rang as I, on the other hand, was still ranting, and I kept the phone away from my ear as she continued. Okay, are you done now? Yes, I am, and now that I'm relieved that you're alive, I have something important to tell you. My eyebrows furrowed in confusion. If there was anything more important, Rick would have called me. What's wrong? Did something happen? I asked as I took a seat in an empty booth. Yes, it's terrible. Joe, my twin sister. She paused dramatically. All sorts of shit was going through my mind, and I didn't need Lizzie to be such a drama queen. Tell me she's okay. What happened? I asked, clenching my jaw and getting ready to leave just as I sat. Be honest. I thought she might have gotten sick or something worse, but the next words that came out of Lizzie's mouth, I nearly cracked my phone. She fell in love with the Hobbit and are now dating. I couldn't help the unbelievable laugh that came out of my mouth. I mean, the guy was a flake, and I didn't think Joe needed that kind of guy in her life, but I also wasn't going to tell her who not to date. I will sure give her hell when school starts back up, though. The waitress came over to me and asked my order. I held up a finger indicating I'd need a minute. She nodded and left. Why are you laughing? This isn't a joke, I'm serious. Like swear on my favorite Louis Vuitton bag, serious. She screamed into the phone. I rolled my eyes. Wow, then you must be serious. But Eli is weird as I think Joe falling in love with the Hobbit is. I paused, gathering my thoughts. I can't make her break up with him. Then why did I call you? You're useless, she huffed childishly. And here I thought you missed your big bro, feigning offense to her rebuttal. Yeah, don't get butthurt, of course I did. And I loathe to admit you're correct in saying we can't stop the Hobbit from getting his grubby paws on my twin. She breathed out. She'd hate it. She will, but I've got to go. I'll speak to you later, Eli. Yeah, go be a spy on your secret, not so secret missions, she dismissed. Not a spy, I prefer ninja, I replied in amusement. Whatever you say, Jackie Chan. I knew who that was because since I told them about my past, she insisted I watch Jackie Chan movies. I don't know whether that's an insult or a compliment, I replied honestly. It could be both. She paused and laughed into the phone. But be safe and talk later. I have to go bleach my eyes from the view Josie so generously provided me with. I didn't even ask because I didn't want to know. I said my goodbyes and ended the call. The waitress was waiting patiently. I smiled in thanks. Sorry about that, little sisters can be dramatic. I said, I'll have a burger, fries and a chocolate shake, thanks. I said. She wrote down the order and disappeared. I waited 15 minutes before my order was delivered. I was hungry and dug immediately into the meal. After a few more minutes she came back. I didn't know where to find Freya, but I needed to ask around. Can I get you anything else, handsome? She flirted. I gave her a polite smile and shook my head before getting an idea. Yeah, I'm looking for a Freya Mikkelsen. Any idea where I can find her? I asked, taking a shot. I watched her eyes flash in recognition. You might want to try a bar called Rozo's. She owns it and spends most of her time there. I smiled and looked to her name tag. It read Molly. I paid for my meal and gave her a $50 tip. Thanks, Molly, I appreciate it. She gave me a flirtatious smile as I put on my jacket and exited the booth. Anytime, handsome, she waved. I smiled and left. Rozo's, I thought as I exited. The sun was getting lower, but even so the heat didn't subside. As I continued walking through the streets I felt people following me. I didn't know whether they were vampires or what there were too many people on the sidewalk. I turned off into an empty alleyway and stood with my back against the wall waiting for my two stalkers to show up. My eyes were closed. I picked up the scent of my two stalkers. I smelled the air. Werewolves. Mind telling me why I have two wolves following me? They seemed stronger than the wolves at school. They probably train much more than our wolves. Arms stayed crossed over my chest as I waited for them to answer. Who are you? And what do you want with the Mikkelsen witch? I opened my one eye and glanced at the one who spoke. He looked buff. His muscles were big, and even more so because his hands were clenched at his sides, his irritation showing clearly. The wolf next to him had a much calmer demeanor. Didn't show much on his face, but he looked ready for a fight. I sighed softly and smiled. Well, I mean, if you need magic done, you go to a witch, no? I said, pushing myself from the wall and put my hands in my pockets as I waited for them to process my words. The calmer wolf decided to speak. He narrowed his eyes as he sized me up. I wasn't built big, but I wasn't scrawny either. Yes, and we want to know why an outsider wants to see her. I shrugged and walked away. Like I said, I need a spell done, and apparently she's the best, so if we're done here, I'd like to be on my way. I tried to step away, but the dirty blonde-haired angry wolf stood in my way. Yeah, I don't think you're going anywhere. I narrowed my eyes and looked between the two of them. I smiled smugly. Is that so? They didn't answer. Instead, their eyes flashed gold and attacked me. I evaded their punches easily. The dirty-haired blonde swung a right hook and I caught it on my hand and held it. The other dark-haired one attacked from the back. As he got closer, I thrusted a kick reinforced with chakra to his midsection that let him sail against the wall. He coughed and groaned, spitting out some blood. My attention returned to the dirty blonde-haired guy, his right hand firmly in my grip as I clenched down and broke his hand. I watched him crumble to the ground holding his now broken hand. I fixed my jacket and nodded toward them. Well, as I was saying, I'll be on my way. It was nice meeting you. I mock saluted and exited the alley. I continued my walk and saw a bar called Rozo's. The sign said closed. I put my hand on the handle and pushed hard, braking. The bar was dark. The only light sources was the dimmed lights and the window which the sun shined was a tall blonde behind the bar. She looked in her early 30s, still beautiful though. Mikhailson jeans though, gotta love it, I thought with a small chuckle. We're closed, she said, her mouth set in a firm line as she watched me closely. I smiled and scratched my head. Well, your handle is broken, so being the good Samaritan I decided to let the owner know. I paused and put the handle on the table next to me. Here's that broken handle. I took a step closer to the bar, while she watched me under a close eye, but I wasn't bothered. Now I believe under those circumstances a reward is usually given, right? I said easily. She seemed to ignore my previous statement and put the glass down she was cleaning. Who are you and what do you want? I ignored her tone and continued to survey the bar and sensed for other employees there wasn't any as I took a sit at the bar. Name's Naruto Uzumaki, I said, holding my hand out for a handshake. She didn't take the offered hand, instead stared at me suspiciously. I shrugged and took my hand away, interlocking my fingers underneath my chin. Now about that reward, I believe I earned it, especially after I had to deal with 2 of your guard dogs. Her hand clenched. Did you kill them? She asked shortly. I laughed and shook my head. No, but I'm a busy guy, so I want you to tell me where I could find coal. She scoffed. I don't know a coal. She lied easily. My expression remained the same. Oh, silly me, let me clarify. I'd like you to tell me where I could find your brother Freya Mikhailson, I said with a small smile. Season 2 Chapter 5. Previously on A New Legacy. Secrets revealed. I don't know a coal. She lied easily. My expression remained the same. Oh, silly me, let me clarify. I'd like you to tell me where I could find your brother Freya Mikhailson, I said with a small smile. Naruto Pav. As the words were uttered, she muttered some kind of spell. I tried to move and sighed. You won't be able to move, she said, holding her hand. Of course, a paralysis spell. Hope often used this when we sparred. I grunted but ultimately decided to stay still, and let her have the upper hand. I'm sure she wanted to know why all of a sudden I was looking for her brother, since they probably had many enemies. I see that, yes, I answered and relaxed my body. You don't seem worried. She raised an eyebrow in question. I'm not especially worried. I could get out of this spell, I admit. I paused, flexing a bit. She put more power into the spell. It's much stronger than I'm used to, but this gives you some ease, so I'll stay in here. I attempted to shrug, but it didn't come off as such. Why are you looking for Cole? Did he hurt someone you care for and now you're looking for revenge? I chuckled softly and shook my head at the question. No, however, he does have information I need. I don't care what he did in his life, it's not my business, I said honestly. And what information would that be? I don't think you would know what I need to know, so if you could please direct me to where I could find him, that would be just super, I said with some humor. Clearly she didn't find it amusing and strengthened the hold. I heard the door open and turned my head and saw a blonde walk in. She was about 5, 6 feet and blonde hair hung over her shoulders. She had a feisty look about her, but she was very attractive. Sister, what do we have here? She pointed toward me. I flared my chakra and broke the spell, fixing my jacket. Rebecca Mikhailson, I presume. I looked to her and she raised an eyebrow and nodded. The Michaelsons sure had some luck in the gene pool, I said quietly. I walked around the bar and looked at the pictures on the wall. I took one off. It was a younger Hope. She was probably 15 in the picture. Her blue eyes shone brightly as she smiled with her mother. How did you get out of that spell? Asked Freya, confused. I answered without looking away from the picture. I felt Rebecca come closer as well as Freya. They were cautious but didn't attack. I told you, I could get out of it easily, but I let you keep it up because I'm not looking for trouble. I just want to know where your brother is, so that I can ask him my questions and get back to the Salvatore school. I said when I finally put the picture back on the wall and turned to the 2 blonde women who now watched me. Their suspicion turned to curiosity. You're from the school Alaric and Caroline started. What are you? I don't sense any magic and you're definitely not a vampire, she trailed off. I'm something completely different and I'll leave it at that, so can you help me or not? Rebecca answered, now crossing her arms over her chest. Answer this first. She paused and pointed to the picture I was looking at. Do you know who she is? I turned back and smiled at the picture and nodded my head. I do, and that's why I need to speak to your brother. Rebecca looked to her sister and nodded. All right, if you have a car you can follow us back to our home, but if you try anything I don't care. If you're a student at Salvatore I'll stick your head on a pike. Rebecca threatened, seriously flashing her vampire face. If I wasn't completely in love with my darling I might have flirted with her a bit and said something completely perverted, but I held my tongue and nodded my head. Yeah, sure, no worries. I waved off and walked toward the door. I looked down to the handleless door and turned back. You really need to get this door looked at, I said with a smirk before going to my car. Hope Pav. I aimlessly wandered the dark void waiting for Ryan to show up. I really hoped I was making the right choice. From the look on your face I'd say you've made up your mind, he said from in front of me, scaring the living shit out of me in the process. What the hell? I said with my eyes wide, watching the curly-haired man smirk. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you, Hope. I would have believed him if it wasn't for that damn smirk on his face. I scoffed, regaining my composure. Sure you didn't, I muttered, and decided to this over with. So how do we get out of here? I asked plainly. Well, since you're giving my father, let's say, indigestion, he questioned before continuing. He wants you out, and there's a specific place that I know of where the monsters spawn from. I see, so you want us to be there, and when he gets ready to spit out a monster it'll be us instead. He nodded. Well, that sounds easy. Too easy, what's the catch? He chuckled. Smart girl, the catch is that there's no set time for this spawning or monsters to take place. I highly doubt my bastard father keeps a diary. He said the last bit sarcastically. I sighed inwardly, I knew it wouldn't be too easy. Why hasn't Malivore risen yet? I asked, because if I didn't kill him and all 3 keys were used, he should have risen and well wreaked havoc, but it didn't seem like there was any activity whatsoever. Now that is a story for another time. Besides, if you think hard enough I'm sure you'll arrive at the answer, Hope, he said. Now follow me. I nodded and walked behind him, pondering his words. Malivore needed 3 keys to rise, but he didn't have a body to use since he was just a golem. Think, Hope. What could be necessary for him to unleash all those monsters that he collected over the centuries that he roamed freely? Ryan and Landon are his sons, but it seemed Ryan didn't want to collect the keys in the first place. The first key activated after Landon entered the school, and he said there was a voice that wanted him to steal it. The same thing happened with the common link is Landon. My eyes widened and I stopped dead in my tracks. He created his own sons so he would have a vessel. I breathed out unbelievably. The lengths he went to, and here I thought he was lonely and wanted a family, but that wasn't it. I saw Ryan stop as well. He didn't turn around, but the tension in his shoulders were enough to know that I hit the nail on the head. I'm right, aren't I? He created you to have a vessel, but since he already had Landon, why impregnate Sayla? I asked to him and continued to walk, and I followed. There was some silence before I heard him speak. I didn't have what was necessary for my father to inhabit my body. I wasn't enough. He trailed off, trying to act indifferently, but there was something else in his tone. Sadness, regret, or even maybe anger. I didn't know what it was, but it was clear he resented his father. So then he told me to find a woman that would be good enough to birth a new vessel. He chuckled without humor. That's where Sayla comes in. She wanted to be of use to the Triad, and so I chose her as an incubator. I saw his fist clench. I was disgusted by how easily he did what his father wanted. Then came Landon. Once he got what he wanted, he pushed her back into the world, until the time for Landon to be of proper age so that he could use his body as a vessel. He finished off. I shook my head sadly as I listened to him speak. I'm not sure whether he meant to tell me all that, but it was abundantly clear to me there was no love lost between his father and himself. I see, that's why you kidnapped Landon from the school, not only to find the last artifact but also because he was necessary. But when I jumped in I messed up your plans. I half-stated. Half-axe. You did, but thanks to you I no longer have to deal with my father's control. He stopped, turning to face me. His voice no longer echoes in my mind to do his bidding, so yes, maybe I'm thankful to you for that, he said before putting his mask back up and motioned with his hand. We're here. I still don't trust you, I said honestly. He laughed, but it held real amusement. I never expected you to, but like I said, I'll go my own way and try and live my own life while you deal with all this mess. He shrugged as he so easily absconded. Responsibility, I scoffed. Real responsible of you, I said sarcastically. I know, I'm the poster child for responsibility, he played along. Now we wait. I asked even though I knew the answer already. Yup, he said, popping the pea like a kid. I sat and wondered how long I would have to wait for Malivore to spit me back up. The objective I had didn't change. I needed to complete my transition and find a pit and do the same thing over again. Naruto Pav. I followed the Michelsons' SUV in my car. They pulled off to a property in the middle of the French Quarter. It was clear it was more residential, but when I got out of the car the house looked big. I passed a pole with a poster and Hope's face on it. I stared at the woman in front of me. There was something weird. It's clear they were looking for Hope, but they didn't know who she was. I walked behind Rebecca and Freya and came to some gates, the Michelson crest adorning it. The same one Hope wore as a place looked old but well preserved. Welcome to the abattoir, said Rebecca. I looked around the compound. It was big, old, but it suited the Michelsons and the stories Hope used to tell me about her family. I honestly felt like I knew them, but I didn't expect to meet them like this. I picked up 3 other signatures in the home. One was small like a baby and the other 2 was strong. I could feel the power roll off them. The one had a similar signature to Rebecca. Before I could continue my thoughts, I heard a British accent ring off the walls of the entrance. I looked to the balcony where the voice came from. There stood a man with dark brown hair and dark brown eyes, probably about 6'1". He looked into between 18 to 19. Do you trust me, that little sister, that you couldn't leave me with my nephew for even an hour? He asked with a smirk. I watched him and Rebecca banter back and forth before his attention turned to me. And it appears you've picked up a stray, he said curiously, his eyes sizing me up. I wouldn't call myself a stray per se, I said, shrugging off his comment. More like a curious fox. I grinned, giving my own fox grin with a glint in my eye. I watched Cole as his facial expression changed. You know what they say, curiosity killed the cat, he quipped from his position on the stairs. Perhaps, but a cat didn't have the cunningness of a fox to avoid such a predictable death, I retorted easily. I see, and what business does a curious fox have in the home of the original family? He said, using his vampire speed to try and intimidate me, but my eyes followed his movement. He way faster than the other vampires, but with the receiving the Rinnegan combined with my innate abilities, I was able to do it. He was now close to my face. I stared back at him, unflinching with a bored expression. Malivore, I said. I saw the flash of recognition in his face. His hand reached out to put me in a chokehold. I dodged it and kicked him across the room. Hope was right about you. Always the act first, ask questions later kind of guy, I said with a grin and flashed my canines and waited for him to come at me, but Rebecca stopped him with a hand to his chest. Why do you look like you've seen a ghost, brother? She asked, half confused and half, then turned her attention to me. And why do you know that name? He didn't answer. Instead he stared me down, but I raised my eyebrow. Because Hope Andrea Michelson is my girlfriend, and for some reason I'm the only one of this god-forsaken planet that remembers her. My jaw clenched as I said it and stared straight at Rebecca. All right, let's just all calm down, Cole. Put away your fangs and stop trying to attack one of Alaric's students. She looked to me. And do you mind explaining who this girl is? Because we found pictures and letters with that name, but no one in our family remembers who she is. I sighed. First of all, I'm not a student, more of a self-defense instructor at the school, I said to Freya, and watched Cole, still watching me suspiciously. Second of all, I need a drink. You've got any whiskey or bourbon? I looked to the vampires and witch in the room. Aren't you underage? I shrugged. Old enough to kill, old enough to drink is my motto, so any whiskey. Rebecca chuckled while Cole smiled a bit at what I said, but Freya shook her head and took a seat on the couch. Here you go, so why don't you tell us what you know? She said, handing me the drink. I drank some of it and nodded. I'll show you some of my memories of her, I said, sitting on the sofa facing the Michelsons. I just need you to make direct eye contact with me. Why? Asked Cole suspiciously. I sighed. I don't expect you to trust. You Michelsons have the same trust issues. To answer your question, Cole, it would let me project my memories so that you can see that the person you were looking for exists. I said. The rest nodded. Go ahead, and don't think I forgot about that dig at our family, huffed Cole as they made eye contact with me. Real quick, I realized Naruto had this kind of ability when he shared his chakra, but it's obviously a bit different in my story, so yeah, anyway, back to the story. Third POV. Naruto flipped through the signs for the jutsu quickly and murmured, Memory Kyoyu no Jutsu, he said before his eyes changed to the magenta Rinnegan he possessed and started playing the memories he had of Hope. Pleasure to meet you, but I still haven't got the lovely lady's name. He smiled charmingly at Hope. Hope for her part was surprised but decided to introduce herself. I'm Hope Andrea Mikaelson, she said, smiled and shook her hand and brought it up to his mouth and placed a soft kiss on the back of it. A beautiful name for a beautiful woman, I suppose. He smiled before letting go. He watched the girl's cheeks tint a lovely pink. Asterisk. Different memory. Naruto stepped over to the girl who was trying desperately not to let her tears spill. His heart ached for the emotions he saw swirling in her. Blue pulled her against his chest and held her as she sobbed. I'm sorry, does it make me a monster for wanting to kill him because he betrayed my trust? She asked brokenly. Naruto sighed and spoke next to her ear. You're not a monster, Hope. A monster is something that no longer feels anything after they've taken a life. A monster feels nothing but hatred. He moved her face, cupping her cheeks, staring into her eyes. You, Hope Andrea Mikaelson, are not a monster. You were hurt, betrayed in the worst way by someone you cared about. It hurts. But Alaric is right, hatred and vengeance is not the way to vent. That is the worst kind of punishment for those who cut you so deeply. Forgive and move on and be better. He smiled, using his thumbs to wipe away her tears. I don't know your father, but I'm sure Alaric has his own version of who he thought he was, but I know that you do too. Others tend to only see the bad and never the good, so don't give in to the hatred, alright? Different memory. My father was the original hybrid Niklas Mikaelson, my mother the werewolf Alpha Haley Marshall. She began to tell him her story from what she could remember as a child, from what her aunts told her happened when she was a baby. She told him about how her father sent her away from New Orleans, her kingdom, while he made sure her home was safe enough for her to return. She told him about how when she was 7 she met her family and her father for the first time since she was a baby. I was 7 and an ancient magic was in me. I lived with it for a couple of months until it made me hear whispers. It was awful. She said her voice had broken slightly as she was telling him about her past. It hurt. She never really discussed it with him or anyone really, and now the dam was bursting. He raised his head and reversed their positions as he leaned against the headboard, holding the girl between his legs, and allowed her to cry into his chest. You don't have to continue if it's too difficult, princess, he said softly. It saddened him that she went through hell since before she was born. People trying to kill her just like him, but the difference was she had a family that would go to the ends of the world to protect her. No, I want to just keep holding me, please, she half pleaded. Always, princess, always, he said softly. For a moment everything was quiet and the only sounds that was heard in the room was their heartbeats, and broke the silence and started talking. It got too much. My 7-year-old body couldn't handle an ancient spirit and everything else at the same time. My family made a sacrifice. My Aunt Freya Mikaelson was and is the strongest witch after my grandmother Esther and Grand-Aunt Dahlia. She used a spell that took the hollow out of me and split it amongst my father, my Uncle Cole, Uncle Elijah and Aunt Rebecca. The sacrifice was that we couldn't be in the same place, never mind the same state, so each of them traveled to different parts of the world, while still promising always and forever. She paused and took a breath. Quote. Different memory. Naruto sparred with Hope on the deck near the lake. Stop overextending. Use your anger and aggression, don't let it use you, Hope, he said as he dodged the furious punches. I know. He got her into a chokehold. She stomped her foot onto his and knocked the back of her head against his nose, used a roundhouse kick, nailing him into his midsection, and watched him sail into a tree. He got up and wiped the blood from his nose and watched the girl raise an eyebrow. You mean like that? She wore the Mikaelson smirk. He chuckled. Exactly like that. He ran towards her, again. Different memory. Who are you? And how did you get past the others? I raised my eyebrow as I held 2 kunai in my hands and tilted my head to the question. How do you think? I asked sarcastically. The man looked angry. He raised his gun and aimed to shoot me, but I appeared behind him, sliding the kunai through the flesh in his neck. I was angry because he threatened my mate, and my voice held a demonic quality as I spoke. I'll see you in hell, you fucker, I said, removing the kunai as he dropped to the ground, losing blood by the liter. His eyes dropped as his chest heaved one last breath. I sighed and put his body in the scroll before turning to Hope and the twins. You were shot, said Hope. I grimaced but didn't let it show on my face. My face was blank. I'm fine. I waved off her concern. She looked to me, but I turned my gaze to Josie and ripped the gate off the cell. Hope, give her your blood, I said before I felt a pain near my chest. The bleeding started up again. Fuck, I breathed heavily, leaning up against the wall trying to expel the poison. Hope cut her hand and let Josie drink her blood. After a few seconds, Josie's bleeding stopped and Hope came near me. Come on, you too, baby. You're not healing. I shook my head as I opened my eyes. Stop being stubborn, those bullets are made from mud of Malivore. Come on, please, she pleaded with tears in her eyes. I'll be fine, your blood won't work, Hope, I said honestly. She looked confused. Your blood or vampire blood causes havoc in my system, so relax, I won't die. I cracked a smile. I heard footsteps and shoved her behind me, but I saw Alaric's face and he looked relieved. Different memory. I didn't expect you to be awake so quickly. I tried to move, but I felt my arms chained. My gaze traveled up to see it was chained into the wall. What is this, Hope? I said, pulling on the chains, but the pain in chest made it more difficult. I didn't want you to stop me, she said, looking down at the ground. Stop what, Hope? I'm even more frustrated by her vague answers. I'm going to stop Malivore by jumping in there, she said, finally looking in my eyes. My mouth dropped open. No. No, you are not doing that. Please, we can find another way. There is no other way. Malivore was created by a witch, vampire and wolf, she said, chuckling dryly. I am the loophole, Naruto, don't you see? I shook my head, refusing to let her do something so stupid. I always wondered whether I was a miracle or a mistake, she said, trying to convince me, or maybe herself. I didn't know, but what I did know was that she was never a mistake. That's simple. You were always a miracle, never a mistake, Hope, I said sincerely, pulling on the chains. Laughed and came to me, kissing me. I love you so much, baby, but I have to do this, she said, walking away. I tried pulling more. I felt it giving way. Hope, if you do this, I'll hate you, I said, trying to convince myself. My eyes were filling with tears as I watched her smile sadly. You could never, but you won't remember me anyway. No one will. She walked to the guy who just woke up and casted some kind of spell. I watched her stepping closer to the edge of the pit. Hope, I screamed as jumped into the pit. My tears were streaming down my face as I felt my eyes burning even more, but I didn't care about any of that. I needed to get to her before she jumped. I gathered all my strength, breaking the chains. I ripped the wall and heard it crumble. I ran over to the pit, but it sealed up. My fists were raw as I pounded the ground, screaming her name. At that time I didn't even realize that I could still remember her, that she wasn't erased from my memory. Hope, please come back. Naruto Pav. Memory Kyoyukai, I said. I finished my drink and put the glass down on the table. The expressions and emotions in the room was difficult to take in. There was confusion, sadness, regret, and own eyes were glassy as I calmed myself down. Cole's expression was hard, while the two blondes had tears in their eyes. So the reason none of you remember your niece is because she jumped into Malivore to stop it from rising, I said, staring down at the glass in my hand and back up to the Michelsons, and the reason I was looking for Cole is because he was the vampire that helped create it in the first place.